Knuckles Comic Issue 22. We started with a civilian being woken up in bed by a loud smashing sound, and after he shows racism towards all dingoes, making me hate him immediately, he immediately gets the punishment he deserves, as he's revealed to be a High Counselor and gets kidnapped by some Dark Legion goons for it, who are led by an intriguing female echidna this time. Quite a collection for such an avid technophobe. I love them lampshading this hypocrisy. Then she says that the average citizen barely has the basics, and kidnap him, saying that once word of this will get out, they'll soon find out who their true friends and allies are. Then we see the Brotherhood meeting with the Fire Ant Mobians again, with Knuckles here this time, being distrustful of them because, as he puts it, what kind of a family keeps everything such a secret? Saber says that he regrets keeping in the dark for so long and excuses the action. I like how Knuckles is once again the perfect audience surrogate, since after Saber says he's asking them to explain over 400 years of family and echidna history, Knuckles says dismissively that he's always hated history, and it's nothing but boring old news. This is good because while I'm interested in it, I'm sure a lot of fans were terrified just at Saber saying that. Knuckles says that he wants to hear about his father instead, and Saber snarks about him talking about his father and a lack of interest in history all in the same breath. After he simply asks where his father is, we see his father having finished the talk with his ex-wife, unhappy but not surprised. And Julie Sue says that she didn't get a chance to thank the pilot for saving her, showing gratitude, and then asks why she feels like she knows him. Locke then reveals that he's Knuckles' father, so she probably thought he was familiar because of the family resemblance. The line, "You know him as Knuckles," implies that Knuckles isn't his real name, and his whole dialogue as a whole is very stilted and awkward. Who introduces himself as "my son's father"? That's such a long-winded way of saying he's Knuckles' dad. After Julie is surprised and then asks if Knuckles is alright, which is nice of her, the constable brings her away from him instead of letting her talk to him some more, and explains that it's because he knew Knuckles was okay and that his father was going to join him. The constable then shows snarky surprise at her caring about what happened to Knuckles. It took him this long to get it through his head? Then the Dark Legion brings a High Counselor to a scary-looking robot who calls Knuckles' family out on their past behavior, and calls him a sanctimonious hypocrite for wanting to make a deal with the Dark Legion to save his own skin, although I fully understand him for doing that. And really, if it weren't for the Dark Legion's warmongering take-over-the-world tendencies, I would totally support them on this giving back the technology goal. Why wouldn't anyone want to do that? The robot says that the High Counselor's ancestors never offered him any deal when his brother and him sought to restore their homeland to the Mother World almost 400 years ago. Sadly, the text blurb about this confusing statement is totally worthless, as it actually expects me to remember what happened in those particular issue numbers. I don't really remember the names of issues, I remember what happened in them. Then we see Lady Laura being driven home with a constable, and they get stopped by a bunch of protesters, who the constable is worried about arresting because that being an overreaction, freedom of speech and all. It turns out that it's the dingoes protesting about echidnas being unfair, and one of them remarks that if the constable hurts them, other echidnas might feel sympathetic to their cause. It's nice that the dingo actually acknowledges that possibility instead of thinking all echidnas are evil. The constable says through a megaphone that if they must protest, they could at least be decent enough to let traffic come through. What's the point of protesting anyways? Just gets you in trouble. Unfortunately, a bottle of fire gets thrown and a fight breaks out between the dingoes and echidnas, with the dingoes having looked surprised and scared at the thrown bottle. So much for sympathy to their cause. The constable calls the Brotherhood in a hurry, saying that his main concern is getting Knuckles' mother to safety. With that, Knuckles and Archimedes warp away, with Archimedes being endearingly excited at being back in action. And then we see Locke realizing that his ex-wife was right, and he should have thought on Knuckles first and foremost. He hasn't really been much of a parent. He's promptly relieved at Knuckles not being in the Chaos Chamber because he's uncertain about what he should say, although you'd think he'd be a little more concerned at the fact that the Guardian of the Master Emerald isn't guarding the Master Emerald. You had one job! Knuckles rushed into the fight asking in a protective rage where his mother is, and then General Stryker, the leader of the dingoes, shows up in a white void because the artist got lazy, who complains that his people are pathetic because they, according to him, have been reduced to begging for scraps from echidna tables. That's not their fault. And really, I thought they were just protesting racism against them. There was no indication that the dingoes were literally starving. Huh. Knuckles actually tries to reason with him. I'm impressed. I thought he was just running after him to attack him, but instead he punched an echidna looking like him who was about to do that. Stryker says that his problem is too many broken echidna promises, and then proceeds to not explain what it even means. Then we cut to someone being really unhappy about Grandfather Hawking being made surgery on in his skull, and that someone is Hawking, I think. Maybe it isn't? Or maybe it's the High Counselor. It just confused me because he has the same color fur as him and has the mask on him, and is in a hospital setting like him. The doctor says that he's under even though he clearly isn't, so that doctor and all the other echidnas around him must be pretty sadistic to not want to immediately shut him up. Then an echidna with cyborg red eyes thinks about how he wished it was his ancestor lying there instead, and he can still remember the smug look on his face when Edmund and him confronted Mentor before the presentation to the assembled chamber. Is that Dimitri? How is he here among doctors? I mean, the doctors I'd automatically assume are good guys. Anyways, Mentor says that if the plan of his succeeds, he would be a hero to everyone, and that would have set his plans. I wonder if we're ever gonna... We probably are gonna learn what those plans are. Demetrius thinks that back then he wasn't thinking straight, and as Enerjack he was consumed with his own power, with his carelessness leading to his downfall. But this time he'll get his revenge. So he went from Enerjack to having a completely different but far more menacing, serious personality. He went from an emotional large ham to totally completely serious. At the very least, he has a different design, so I can accept that better. And it's character development, because he learned his lesson from wasting time torturing Knuckles. But why didn't they just get rid of Dimitri the minute the police got a hold of him? Enerjack got his power drained, and it was right in the middle of the city. You think the police would have gotten a hold of him. Instead, they let him stay alive, and so here we are. You'd think that they would execute the greatest evil of the Echidna race at the very least. Meanwhile, Knuckles warps back to the Chaotix, who weren't guarding the Emerald for him like they should have been, and Julie shows up and explains that the High Council hasn't spent a long progress on constructing houses for the dingoes. But I remember one of them saying he was deeply sympathetic to their cause. Maybe it's more like they're working as fast as they can, but they can only make the progress happen so fast. Not to mention that with the Echidnapolis materializing back on Angel Island, the city has had a few immigrants, like Ebony and Blackjack, so those people will be taking away some potential homes for the dingoes. After Knuckles asks why the dingoes didn't protest before, Julie explains that it's because the elections for the High Council are coming up, so whoever gets voted in could either advance the program or get rid of it. And since the average citizen hasn't weighed in with an opinion for or against it, nobody knows what the smart course of action is. She also explains that the anti-tech counselor has been missing since last night. Find it surprisingly difficult not to smile at that. His wife unfortunately isn't talking because she's too afraid of the consequences, I guess, and Knuckles asks how she knows about all this while having a knowing smirk rather than being annoyed, which really shows a good friendship bond between the two, as Julie is acting suspicious by not telling him how she knows, and he doesn't seem to care. It's like he totally accepted her for who she is. After Vector says that she's got friends in low places, Julie says, looking annoyed, that the constable told her to find the Chaotix and arrange a meeting. After we see the female Dark Legion leader being sadistic as a traitor to their cause is being punished, it's revealed that the insurrection has begun by a smirking goon, and Dimitri brags about how he was able to brainwash the High Counselor Pravda into praising him. Pretty creepy. It's confusing because he just said he was going to give the city a savior, but there's no way the city would accept this guy's one. He's so clearly brainwashed. I mean, he talks just like one of Eggman's robots. This issue was written by Ken Penders, and as the return of the Dark Legion, headed by Dimitri, who hasn't been given the chair for some reason, and they proceed to be a pretty credible threat, with a sadistic new female henchman high in the ranks, and they even brainwashed the High Counselor for the sake of intimidating the public. And I thought roboticization was creepy. The protesting of the dingoes for not getting housing was also pretty interesting. In general, the comic has done a great job making Echidnapolis feel alive. Feel like an actual city that's lived in, that doesn't just purely exist for Knuckles to have missions against the bad guy in. Still, I guess the sheer amount of threateningness of the Dark Legion in this issue went a little overboard by the end, as I finished reading the issue not enjoying myself. But I can't wait to see what happens next.